The photo was already viral before she knew it existed. By sunset, her daughter's school had called. Marcus Hale did not make mistakes. That was the thing people said about him, in boardrooms in Vancouver, in financial columns in Toronto, in the quiet, expensive circles where men like him were discussed in the third person even when they were standing in the room. He had built the Hale Group from a single construction crew into a $12 billion infrastructure empire. He had survived a hostile takeover attempt at 34, a market collapse at 37, and a divorce at 39 that his legal team had contained so completely that the press never recovered a single clean sentence from it. He did not make mistakes. And then, on a gray February morning in West Vancouver, he slid a piece of paper across a kitchen counter to a woman named Nora Callahan, his housekeeper of 14 months, and said, "I'd like to offer you a contract." What happened next would spend 6 quiet weeks building inside the private walls of a penthouse before it detonated, and without warning, across the front page of the Vancouver Sun, the feeds of 4 major financial blogs, and the comment sections of approximately 2 million people who had never met either of them and had very strong opinions anyway. There was a daughter involved. She was 7. Her name was B. Nobody had planned for B. The morning Marcus made the offer, Nora had her back to the room, cloth in hand, cleaning the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching a container ship press slowly through the gray water 40 stories below. When he spoke, "Miss Callahan, could you sit down for a moment?" Not a question. He rarely asked questions. She had worked that out early. He issued statements and waited, and the waiting was its own kind of respect. It gave you room to decide if you wanted to answer. She sat. He put the paper in front of her. She read it once quickly, then again slowly. The way you do when the first pass doesn't produce the reaction you expected. "You want a contract marriage?" she said. "A structured arrangement. 12 months. 4 public appearances per year. You and your daughter would live here. Separate rooms, separate schedules. Monthly compensation, lump sum at the end of term." "Why?" He looked at the window. "My board has spent 8 months constructing a narrative that I'm unstable. Since the divorce. There's a restructuring vote in 14 months. If they get a majority, I lose operational control of everything I built." A pause. "A settled personal life won't fix that on its own, but it removes one of their easier arguments." She let a moment pass. "So I'm a business strategy." "You're someone I trust," he said. "That's rarer than the money." She folded the paper in half. "I'll think about it." She was already thinking about B's specialist referral. The night shifts. The curtain she'd hung in the living room so her daughter could have something that felt like a room of her own. "Take the week," he said, and went back to his office. She said yes on a Thursday. Papers signed Friday. Moved in Sunday. B told only that they'd be staying somewhere new for a while, like a long house sit, walked into the penthouse, and pressed both palms flat against the windows and stared at the ocean below with the focused reverence of someone visiting somewhere sacred. Marcus came out of his study when he heard them arrive. He stood in the hallway and watched the girl at the glass. Something moved through his face. Nora filed it away without naming it. The first month was professionally neutral. Correct. He left at 7:15. Returned by 8, said good evening. Asked no personal questions. He answered the ones she asked with the careful economy of someone who had been burned by openness before. But B had no such caution. She began appearing in the kitchen at 6:30 each morning in her fox-printed pajamas, carrying a book she used primarily as a prop, and settling at the island to watch Marcus make coffee with the unguarded intensity of a scientist in the field. He did not ask her to leave. The third morning she looked up and said, "Do you know how to make French toast?" Marcus looked at her. "No. My mom uses orange zest. In the batter. You need the small grater holes." He made French toast that Saturday. He had looked it up Thursday to give himself time to practice. He burned the first 2 attempts, got the third right, and set a plate in front of B without ceremony. She ate it standing at the counter and told him the zest ratio was still off. He received this without expression. Nora watched from the doorway and felt something in her chest go soft in a way. She immediately tried to reverse. The first gala was in March. Nora borrowed a dark green dress from her friend Dana and spent the cab ride downtown doing the internal math of someone preparing to perform a version of themselves they hadn't rehearsed. She didn't expect to find it manageable. She was surprised. Marcus kept his hand at the small of her back, not possessively, steadily like a parenthesis and introduced her simply, without over-explanation, and talked to her during the event like they were continuing something, not staging it. On the way home, they sat in the car in silence. It was comfortable. That was the problem. She looked out the window, at the city going dark, and told herself firmly that comfort was not the same as something real. She almost believed it. The vetting folder was not hidden. That was the part that landed hardest. It was sitting under a stack of mail on the kitchen table, and when she moved the mail, it fell open, and her name was at the top of the first page in clean serif font, and she stood there and read the entire thing with the slow, specific nausea of watching your own trust be quietly autopsied while you hold the scalpel. Background check. Financial history. Psychological profile summary. References cross-verified. And at the bottom, in what was clearly a lawyer's shorthand, low risk. Motivated by daughter's welfare. Unlikely to go to press. Unlikely to go to press. She put the folder back exactly where she'd found it. Finished the kitchen. Picked B up from school. Made dinner. Waited until B was asleep. Then she knocked on Marcus's study door. He looked up. "You had me profiled," she said. "Not just background checked, assessed. Your lawyer wrote that I was unlikely to go to press. Like I was a risk being managed." He went very still. "I was a liability calculation, Marcus. Not a person you trusted. I had that done before I approached you. That doesn't change what it says about how you see me." He stood up. He didn't reach for an explanation. That was the part that disarmed her most. She'd braced for the boardroom. Composure, the careful reframe. Instead, he just stood there and let the weight of it sit. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't. I might leave." A pause. "I understand." She walked out, closed the door softly, sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her hands between her knees and stared at the floor. B appeared at 9:15, climbed in beside her. "Are you sad?" "A little." "Is it Marcus?" "Why would you think that?" "He's in the living room in the dark again. He does that when he's thinking. But tonight it's more." B pulled at her sleeve. "Mom," he looked up French toast tutorials. "I saw his search history on the kitchen tablet. Nobody does that unless they mean it." Nora closed her eyes. "Go to sleep, bug." She didn't sleep. She lay in the dark and turned the word "mean it" over and over like something she'd found on the ground and wasn't sure yet was valuable or just old. She did not leave. But she did not stay warmly. There were 11 days of careful, exhausting politeness, the kind that takes more energy than conflict, because you have to maintain it consciously, every single moment. Marcus did not push. He was present, punctual, restrained. He left a book on the kitchen counter one morning with no note. She knew which page. She didn't open it. He took calls in his study with the door half open. She wasn't listening, but the apartment was quiet. "How many seats are we short?" A pause. "Then we need something public before the 15th. Something that reads as stable." She noticed things she'd been too careful to notice before. The way architects addressed him when they came. Not like a client, like a reference point. A framed photograph half obscured by a coat rack in the hallway. A hospital wing dedication. The Hale name in the background. No press coverage she could find when she searched it. He was more than he'd said. She could feel the shape of it without seeing the edges. She told Dana over the phone, "There's something he hasn't shown me." "Are you going to stay long enough to find out?" Nora looked at the water. "I don't know yet." The photograph went live on a Wednesday morning. A freelance photographer had been at the March Gala. Background presence, the kind you don't register. He'd caught Marcus and Nora at the end of the evening. Her head turned slightly toward him, his hand at her back, and on his face an expression that looked nothing like the controlled public composure Marcus Hale was known for. The photographer sold it to a financial blog covering the Hale Group board dispute. The headline read, "Hale's Secret." Fresson, sources say Billionaire's sudden engagement is boardroom theater. By Thursday, it was in the Vancouver Sun. By Thursday afternoon, someone had found Nora's name and her previous employment. By Thursday evening, 3 outlets had used the phrase paid companion, and one had published the name of the cleaning agency. B's school called at 4:53 p.m. Nora was sitting at the kitchen table with her coat still. She'd walked in 20 seconds before, and when Marcus came out of his study, his communications team had been calling for 2 hours. His lawyer was on hold. He looked at her face. He put the phone face down on the counter. "Tell me what you need," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and then something shifted in her, not breaking, not softening, something deciding. "I need you to call your PR team," she said. "And I need you to tell them to stand down." He blinked. "Nora, if they release a statement, it'll be managed, careful, it'll read exactly like what everyone already thinks this is." She stood up. "You said you trust me. Then trust me. What are you going to do?" "Something your lawyers would never advise." She picked up her phone. "I'm going to the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery tomorrow morning. There's a journalist, Petra Moss. She's written fair pieces. I've read her work and I'm going to talk to her. Just me, no handler, no statement. I'm going to tell her exactly what this is and exactly what it isn't, and I'm going to do it before your board can use it as ammunition." The silence that followed was long. He stopped. "Terrifying?" "Brave," he said. "Stupidly brave. Those are usually the same thing." He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, something older than that, something that looked like recognition. She met Petra Moss at 9 the next morning on the stone steps. No team, no notes, coffee in hand. She told the truth. Not all of it. Some things were private, and she said so plainly. But she said yes. They had an arrangement. Yes, it began practically. Yes, she'd been his housekeeper. No, she wasn't embarrassed by that. No, she wasn't going to perform embarrassment for anyone's comfort. She said, "I'm a working mother. I made a decision that was right for my daughter, and I'd make it again." She said, "What happens between us now is none of your business. But I'm not hiding in someone's penthouse while people put words on me." The interview ran that afternoon. She had not told Marcus what she would say. He watched it go live from his study with his communications director in the room, who said, "She just," and didn't finish the sentence. Marcus read it twice, set his phone down. "Clear my afternoon," he said. The director blinked. "The board call." "Clear it." He found her in the kitchen. B was at school. The apartment was quiet. He stood in the doorway for a moment and then said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know. You did it anyway. Someone had to move first." She looked at him. "Tell me the rest of it, Marcus. All of it, not the contract version. The real one." He sat down. He told her about the board. 3 members who'd been building a case for 2 years. The vote moved to June. The 2-seat margin he was short. He told her about the divorce, what it had actually cost him, not in money. He told her about the vetting report, not as justification, but as evidence of a man who had learned, through specific and painful experience, to check everything before he believed it was safe. Then he told her about the Hale Foundation, the private charitable trust. No press involvement, no naming rights, no public profile. Hospital wings, family services grants. A specialist treatment program in Calgary that his foundation had quietly funded 3 months ago. He told her the name of the program. She recognized it. Her sister's intake number was somewhere in that file. She sat very still. "You did that," she said, "without telling me. I didn't want you to feel like it changed the balance between us." "Marcus, I know. You are," she said slowly, "the most exhausting person I have ever tried to stay angry at." He said nothing. The city moved outside the windows, enormous and indifferent. Then the front door opened and B came in. Home early, school had called. Something about the media attention, still in her backpack, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at both of them with the specific alertness of a child who has learned to read rooms. She set her bag down, reached inside, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made this at lunch," she said, and put it on the table between them. Crayon, wildly proportioned, a large window, the ocean below, or possibly a very lumpy carpet. 2 figures on either side. A smaller figure in the middle, arms stretched out toward both of them. "That's me," B said. "I'm taller in real life. I ran out of room." She picked up her backpack, walked to the fridge, examined its contents with great seriousness, and said without looking at them, "I think you should probably just stay together. It would be easier for everyone." She took a yogurt and went to her room. The board met in June. Marcus walked in with his lawyers and 3 institutional investors who had spent a week reviewing 12 years of decisions made by a man who had never once optimized for short-term optics. The restructuring vote failed by 2 seats. The press ran a follow-up piece. It was shorter than the first. The photograph they used was not the gala shot. It was Nora on the gallery steps, coffee in hand, looking directly at the camera, not performing anything. The caption read, "She spoke for herself." Nora saw it on her phone. She put it face down on the counter and went back to making breakfast. The contract had technically expired 6 days before the board vote. Neither of them had mentioned it. One evening in July on the cedar deck, Bea asleep inside. The ocean silver in the late light, Nora said, "I'm scared of this." Marcus turned. "Not the press. Not any of that, this." She gestured between them. "The real version?" "So am I," he said. "You don't look it. I've had more practice concealing it than you have." She looked at him for a long time. He looked back, not performing patience, just actually present, in the way she'd first noticed. 14 months ago when she'd thought he was cold and had long since understood he was careful. "I want to try," she said. "Not a contract. Not an arrangement. The actual thing. It might be harder than everything we've already survived." "Probably." "Okay," he said. "Then okay. Not a fairy tale. Not a clean arc. 2 people on a deck above a silver ocean deciding without ceremony, without performance, to stop managing the distance between them." Inside, Bea slept in a room that was genuinely hers now, in a home that had become theirs without anyone planning it, the way the best things usually do. The water below kept moving. Ancient, unhurried, enormous. And Nora Callahan, who had walked into a billionaire's kitchen with a cleaning caddy and walked out with something nobody had written a contract for, and looked at the horizon and felt, for the first time in a long time, like she was exactly where she'd decided to be. Not placed, not arranged. Decided. Watch the next story on your screen.